Hey there, RTD viewers. Excited to share with you a first edition of the RTD Book Club. I recently came across a great book online. It was a free open source book that I read and learned a lot, and I thought I would share it with you guys. Being that the whole idea of rethinking the dollar is about educating yourself, so I figure there's a lot of people out there who love reading and love to educate themselves for continuous learning's sake. And so I came across a book, read it. It's a very short book, and actually went through the process of kind of sort of republishing it. Took it from the digital form and put it in print, or reprinted it rather, and kind of try to keep it as original as possible, and want to share with you guys as a free just click and download, read, and just educate yourself. So a little bit of information about the book. It's called Unconstitutionality of Fiat Money. It was originally published in 1885 by Francis A. Brooks. Did a little research on him, and he was somewhat of a medical doctor, I believe, and somewhat of a political activist in his time, who kind of opposed and has some viewpoints on the legal tender issues of his era. And so he put together a short paper here. It's originally about 30 pages, and when I retyped it and condensed it down to about 15 pages, great reading. And he actually discussed three key Supreme Court decisions in regards to legal tender, and gave a great stance on how it's kind of bogus for the most part. And then also there's a lot of historical aspects in there as far as the Supreme Court, things that happened. Not sure most of you guys may not know, but prior to 1870, there was only 8 judges, and so because of some things dealing with this legal tender cases, they actually appointed a ninth judge onto the circuit, or to the bench rather, which of course played in favor of continuing to the legal aspects of fiat currency, or the greenback in a sense. So anyway, just wanted to get to the book, share some thoughts with you, some key things that I thought was very informative and very educational for myself. I'm sure you'll find the same thing as well. And then also give you guys a chance to, I guess, get involved with the book club and whatnot, looking to put together a lot of other books that I've read and I found to be very educational and informative, for you to learn as well as to share with others, to give them a historical aspect of monetary policy as well as economics. So give you more details on that in a minute. But to dive into the book, give you a little insight behind it, I actually, redid the cover, or whatnot, and put a little spice, a little color to it. Because you imagine, originally written in 1885, is pretty bland due to lack of technology then. And so a couple things that stood out, as I mentioned, the Supreme Court decisions that redefine legal tender. And so in this book here, he covers the three, primary early Supreme Court cases that kind of played into the idea of fiat money, or greenbacks, becoming a mainstream thing, even though it was initially intended to be a temporary thing because of the Civil War. So he addressed a few cases there, and I'll briefly just give you a heads up for those that may not know. The first decision was the Hepburn versus Greenwald, and it originally came before the court in 1867, and took a while for them to actually deliberate on it and voice their opinion. But it was in favor of fiat currency, or the greenback, being technically unconstitutional as far as the government being able to issue them for payments of debts prior to 1862. And so that was the whole Hepburn versus Griswold case that was discussed. And the second one was a pair of decisions rather, from the Knox versus Lee and the Parker versus Davis, which took place in 1871. So not too long after the first decision was rendered. And in between that time, that was the whole idea of the Supreme Court, at the ninth person being added to the bench, who happened to be in favor of legal tender in the form of the greenback. And he voices his opinion in saying that it wasn't by coincidence. And so he questioned a lot of things as far as how Congress actually went about, and the president went about appointing the ninth judge who was in favor of it. So he puts a little bit of a conspiracy twist to it, and actually backs it up a little bit with some reason based upon the Constitution as well as other Supreme Court decisions prior to this. And then the very last one was the Juilliard versus Greenman in 1878, which had to do with an act of the New Coinage Act, rather, in regards to how silver played out. And so based upon those three cases there, within a decade, this gentleman here, Francis A. Brooks, did some very good breakdown analysis of how and why it was very questionable as to how first decision was upheld as far as it being illegal, and then the last two was in favor of it. And here we are today, 100+ years later, and the idea of legal tender hasn't really been presented much, and the options available be outside the Federal Reserve note. And so, briefly, don't want to keep it too long. Want to go through it and just share a couple things. I'll highlight it in the book. It's about 15 pages long, and as I mentioned, it goes through a lot of historical things and stuff that you don't really hear on don't hear talked about, or for most part learn in your economics class or in textbooks in general. And so let me find this. Highlighted some things here I wanted to share briefly. Here's a quote here from, I believe it is probably from one of the prior judges. And it talks about money. It says, money as defined by President. I'm not sure who this was. As I mentioned, I try to keep it as original as possible. So I made a couple corrections, but for the most part, kept the errors as is, just so you can see how the 19th century text was. Is that kind of currency which has had an intrinsic value, and which thus, if not used as currency, would still be wealth. And so in reference to the coinage, a lot of things he points out is how it didn't take a legal tender act of 1862 to define money, because prior to that time, everyone knew what money was. And so the argument was that Congress has the power to basically create money, when actuality it was never really a question as what it wasn't a question as what money was. It was more so, could they issue paper or bills of credit, based upon being able to pay in the future. So he made a little argument here saying that, it was common sense that money was, gold and silver. There was no question about it whatsoever. And the whole idea of the Supreme Court was to see if paper could be used as a substitute to pay off debts prior to 1862. And then after the war, could it still be issued? And so he made some good points there, and he used a lot of quotes and things like that to kind of, prove his point there. And then to go here, a little bit of a longer one. But the United States Constitution, as it has been understood and interpreted previously to this occasion, does not confer on Congress any power whatever, with the exception of legislation in bankruptcy, over the contracts and business relations or private affairs of the citizens of his property, or pecuniary relations whatsoever. Is then be true, in fact, that gold and silver in the form of coin do not and never did derive their legal tender monetary priorities from legislation, and that no legislation to that effect had ever been enacted by the separate states. So how does it appear as enacted by the Supreme Court in this decision? And he lists the decision, whatever. So once again, just saying that, gold and silver is legal tender. It wasn't a question. It was all about the paper aspect. And this is in reference to how, in the very last case, the Julia versus Greenman, how the lead judge was quoted here. And he gave a couple quotes here, basically referring to some things that happened in Europe, as far as how the sovereignty of the government plays into the decision makings of their ability to be able to use whatever they choose as money and force it upon the people. And he was saying that, in the United States of America, there's no monarchy, there's no legal dictator type of government here. It was originally intended for the Constitution to be an instrument that the government used to help oversee the states and things like that. So he broke it down quite well in saying that, it's pretty much illegal. So this is just a book, I wanted to keep this semi-short, but he goes through three decisions, as I mentioned here, from 1870 to 71 to 78, and gives a lot of good, thorough breakdown. So, like I said, you can click the button below, and you'll instantly have access to read it. So overall, it's a very, very good book, and I think, you'll definitely enjoy it. It is history. It is history, and it really does a good job of helping you see the mindset of those that live prior to the central banking model, and how he just flat out can tell you money money is gold, money is silver. I mean, it's just common knowledge, and whereas today it's not the case. So that is, for the most part, the book there, Unconstitutionality of Fiat Money by Francis Brooks. So I want to get it to you guys, and also I want to get your feedback because I have a lot of other books that I want to share, and I want to make sure that people are interested in learning and things like that. So I want to really start the RTD Book Club, and so I wanted to make it a monthly subscription-based thing where you get books like this, free open source books that I myself go through and chop up and re-edit and post and make it nice and readable for you, as well as able to share with others. So I want to find out if there's interest, so let me know. Leave a comment below. I would love to get your thoughts on this book, especially once you read it. It's 15 pages long. It's quite easy to read. There's a lot of more books out there that I would love to share with you guys, and so wanted to get your thoughts on the RTD Book Club. So leave me a comment below, and look forward to hopefully giving you more books. Enjoy.